Welcome back to Sunrise as we continue this Tuesday morning. Now, landlords and tenants have a number of responsibilities to remember to ensure that they don't break the law. Now, this morning we'll be looking at the relationship between tenants and landlords, as well as the responsibilities and regulations between the two. Now, joining us to help us on this discussion is a Huizemark estate agent, Lize. And remember, you can be part of our conversation by giving us a call on 011-447-1742 or 011-447-1620. We're also taking your comments on our Facebook as well as our Twitter pages this morning. Good morning to you, Lize, and thanks for joining us right here on Sunrise.
Good morning, Penny. Thank you for having me.
Great stuff. Okay, so let's start off by looking at the obligations of a tenant.
Sure, yeah, well, we can say a lot about that, but the main obligations of the tenant is to firstly pay their rental on time. That would be the first thing, and then to maintain the property. Tenant seems to think that if they just rent, they don't have to look after the property, which is just not right. And people tend to not look at what they sign. So the signing of the contract is really important, and the payment date. There is this myth, we call it a 7-day myth, where tenants think that they have a 7-day period to pay their rental. So that is not true. There's no law that states that. So the rental's got to be paid on the contract date, and make sure, that, Mr. Tenant, that your funds are cleared on that date. That's really important. So that will be the obligations, and to pay your water and lights. That would be really kind, and not to have that cut off. So that would be the main obligations of the tenant.
Now, in terms of the landlord, what are the obligations?
Landlords, sure. To pay their rates and taxes. Some landlords fail to do so, and you know, as in Huizemark, I've learned over the years that the landlords seem, especially when we do the management of the rental for them, that they don't pay the rates and taxes, but they do receive the rental. And then sometimes the tenant's electricity gets cut off. So that's really important that the landlord also looks at paying their rates and taxes, and then maintaining the property. Most of the complaints you will have by tenants is that the landlord's not fixing the property. So it might be with private rental. That happens a lot, so nobody cares. So if you work through a professional estate agency, you will also be more secure that the maintenance will be taken care of on the landlord side. And then, yeah, that will be the main obligations, to just pay your rates and taxes and maintain the property for the tenant.
Right, we're also taking your calls this morning. Give us a call on 011, of course, 447-1742. Those are the numbers that you can call in and be part of our discussion this morning. I'm talking to Lize, who is from an estate agent, Huizemark estate agent. Okay, now, as we continue, we spoke about the obligations of the landlord as well as of the tenant. So what happens when a tenant or a landlord breaks the law in terms of a breakdown in a relationship?
Firstly, the Rental Housing Act will cover most of that as to breaching a contract, but the Rental Tribunal has been active for about, I think I might be mistaken, for 2 years, or the Rental Housing Tribunal. So if there is a dispute between a tenant and a landlord, they have the rights to, you know, dispute that, and they will then give a correct outcome. They also have clerks that can take your call, and you can just ask advice. So when there's disputes, there's definitely the Rental Tribunal. Each province has their own, so it can be utilised by the parties.
Just tell us briefly about the Rental Housing Act.
It's about the law, hey, and keeping in it. Like you asked me now about the obligations. Not, you know, tenants, we've got a thing going around now where people rent with dead people's IDs. And then, you know, we work over the internet a lot, and the landlord never sees the tenant. So they get an ID, and who do you rent to? So the Housing Act will then cover the landlord and the tenant's rights. Within all of that, it's totally covered by the law. So it looks after both parties, totally. And that's why the Act was brought in.
Okay. There seems to be, like in recent time, like a lot of new, things being introduced. People ask you for 5 months bank statements. They'll ask you for, you need to be vetoed, your credit, you know, rating need to be. I mean, some of those things, and besides just the general things that could be viewed as like incorrect in terms of like people say, okay, I don't rent out to people of color, etc., etc. How do you deal with such situations?
It's really difficult because you do get people who tends to tell you that, well, I don't want that, or I don't want that. I would prefer not working with people like that because I cannot advertise that and say, well, I choose not to rent to that or that. But there is a few strict regulations, especially within our franchise, that we will ask a certain amount of pay slips and we will pre-qualify the tenant, and you do get ITC'd as well. I use TPN, it's a tenant profile network, so they have an ITC system. The landlords can use them privately as well, where we ITC the tenant, you know, so it just protects the landlord better. Then we must also, like when you buy a house, you've got to be pre-qualified before the bank gives you a loan. And we've got to also check that you can afford to rent the place. And especially with tenants, you know, 80% maybe of them is renting because of bad credit. So we've got to be very careful when we rent out that we do qualify these people and make sure that they can afford and have their jobs they have. So we will check if they do have permanent
employment
for sure. I have had people where, you know, they will tell you only 2 people's living there and they will have up to 12, 14 people and they will store their business stock in the house. So yeah, it does happen, especially, you know, you get that with the private rentals because everybody can be nice. You're nice, I'm nice. But if I have to check your background and I have to phone the previous people you let it from, that's important. And that's what I would advise landlords, to be very careful who they put into their properties. As to, we know the law well and we know how to bring it into action, where the private landlords will just now put out and say no, no more, and it's a good investment. So that's actually very sad. I will definitely tell you that the landlord can also be put on terms. So if the landlord does something wrong, put them in writing, put him on terms in writing and give him 7 days to comply. If he does not do so, you have the right to vacate the property and leave, and it will not be in breach of the agreement. So definitely the tenants also has the right to put the landlord on terms, and that's why I said, because of the obligations of the landlord, they should not just take the money but also look after the tenants and the water and lights and the levies. So Judith, definitely I will look at putting the landlord on terms there.
Is there a place where Judith can go, or is there a place where if people have problems with their landlords where they can actually
Definitely.
go? What is the process?
The rental tribunal, the housing tribunal.
The housing tribunal.
Yes,
okay.
For sure. She can also report it there, and they can also assist her with advice. Okay. Once you've signed a rental agreement and there was a deposit paid, and you want to move it, and let's say it's private, then you've got a little bit of a problem. But if it's within an estate agency, and the landlord has signed, unfortunately, that is a fixed contract. So she would lose a deposit then and re-rent then something else, because the agreement was closed and signed by the tenant and the landlord. If it's private, it's different. It's going to be on the landlord if he's going to be willing to release her or not. But if it's through an agency, you can still try to talk to the landlord and say, we've got someone who can replace you. So it's also, you know, it's difficult depending on what the situation is with the landlord.
Okay.